Ralph will do both 4 and 6. Okay, digital literacy curriculum. That'll be Tina and Brenda, and then Ralph, you're it.
Yeah, I think actually that we kind of mentioned that it may make sense to do the Learning Commons first, because the curriculum actually ties into the Learning Commons.
Okay, either one.
So, okay, great, and thanks for having me here tonight. Just a quick note that's kind of a funny little tech thing that just happened to me today, which is almost a non-tech thing. I don't know if any of you are familiar with a Rocketbook, if you've heard about these. So you can basically take notes in this. Has a little QR code on each page. You can scan it, and it actually puts it, you can hold on to a digital copy of this. You erase this book by putting it in the microwave with water, and it just erases the whole book once used, so it's reusable. One of the things I just found out today, though, is that if you leave it in your car for about 2 hours in the sun, it also erases it. So as we were, I normally don't sit here with a computer, but my notes for what I wanted to talk about, I think I actually have it all covered here. Were actually erased as we were.
Paper is better.
Yes, yes, but the paper actually erased before we actually transferred it to a digital format. Anyways, it was pretty funny today. So,
it doesn't say anything about.
No, I guess it works in a microwave, and it's actually you have to use a certain pen. But it seems like just the heat from the car today. It was literally
Now you gotta try an oven.
It's not even summer.
No, and definitely we were just at the P-Tech piece at the P-Tech graduation ceremony, and within that time frame, it actually erased my whole book. So, anyways, so tonight though, what I wanted to talk to you about was our Learning Commons, and just give you a quick update. So I'm looking at this from a 30,000-foot view, and I'm happy to dig down deeper as you develop some questions around this. And there's going to be some asks that we're going to be looking at over the next couple of years too, along with this. If you remember, I talked to you a little bit about this back in October in that very, very long presentation that I gave. There was a lot of content in there. Part of it was talking about the transition and how we actually, as we look at our library media services, that we have to look at how to be able to make them sustainable and actually coordinate that from the central office as well, which is one of the things that we'll be asking for in next year's budget, is starting to develop a line for the resources that are going to be needed there. But so a Learning Commons in general, I know you've heard the term before. I mean, we really have talked about our traditional libraries. A transition to a Learning Commons, if you really want to think about what our objective is we want to reinvent the way that we've looked at our traditional library. There's certain elements of it that are always going to be critical. Our research, reading, all of those different components are not going away. But the structure of the way that the library works and what students need to learn has changed over the years. So as the libraries in the past have always been your center for a community or center of a school to be able to gain that information and be that hub for learning, this is still going to be that hub. It's just now that it's also a digital hub as well. So we want to make sure that one of our ways when we reinvent our libraries is to make sure that these centers become focused on a number of different areas. We talk a lot about project-based learning, so whether it's SEM, project-based learning, some STEM initiative, coordinating all of that, the library should be another resource for this. We want to make sure kids have authentic learning opportunities within the libraries. And I know that Audra, who had come back there, she's our library media specialist at Brookside. She can attest to how much she's actually giving students opportunities to be able to learn more about coding in her classrooms by using Spheros for students to be able to kind of play with and actually work on that type of coding opportunities. Spheros? Yeah, or actually no, it's Ozbots. Yeah, it's Ozbots that you use. So there's an yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And we'd be happy to talk more about that in specific, like the different types of things of what a makerspace looks like and so forth. So I just know that time is hard to kind of cover all of that in a very short time frame. We want to make sure that there's opportunities for kids to learn how to research, which is still really important for them to understanding that not only how to research, but what is quality research. And we need to make sure that, we talk a lot about fake news, all the other issues. Kids need to be able to kind of decipher through this. That becomes part of the digital literacy curriculum, which is, once again, that last bullet point, which is this becomes your hub in any one of your schools for digital literacy. So
Well, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So it's a hub. Well, how often would a student be able to work in a hub?
So for this first year right now, they're being, these library media specialists are actually scheduled as a special, so that students see them on a regular basis. There will be open times though too for classes to bring students in and so forth. It really, depending on the size of your space, you can have it as a collaborative area. And I think we'll get to a little bit more about that when we talk about the different zones of a learning area, so that you know that, once again, there's going to be scheduled time that they work on with specifically a library and media specialist or a digital literacy person, but there should be time also for teachers to be able to kind of bring their class down to there. And there's no reason in many cases why you can't have multiple classes working at the same time. That's right. Does that kind of answer the question, or?
No, with technology developing as rapidly as it is, what about connections? A certain amount of learning might take place, whether it's in a library or in a classroom. But why would I have to travel to the other side of the building to do that research, or digital research in the library? I can do it right in front of me in the classroom. You
will be able to for a lot of the research pieces, but who's going to, once again, you've got to be taught how to be able to do that.
That part
yes.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Yeah, the digital resources will be available everywhere, but we only have so much. You do need space for, let's say you're using Ozbots. You need to be able to have space to be able to kind of work on those. So that may be something that you're doing in the Learning Commons in comparison to, your classroom.
Right. But I don't want to. What I would not want to see is you go into the library / media center, and I know they have all this technology in their classrooms. So I'm looking what they're doing, and this is stuff they also do in their classrooms or could do in their classrooms. And if they're not doing it in their classroom, we're not maximizing the possibilities that exist today with technology.
Yeah.
If it's just going to be a couple times a week.
Yeah. No, I think it does take time to kind of integrate that. And that actually, as you start learning more about our digital K curriculum, you'll see how that's going to kind of move forward.
In the library, in the article we read for today,
yeah.
It talked about as new technology is being sampled, that happens in this space, and then it might be something that can roll out to the classrooms as we're able to fund it. But it's literally the place where we're at the edge of innovation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But my view has always been you're spending 80–90% of your time in the classroom. That's where the quality has to take place.
Yeah.
Always.
No,
that's the bottom line.
Yeah, definitely. And this is, once again, this is another resource, another coach for our teachers to be able to kind of integrate that. But we also have to make sure that those skills are actually taught, and someone has to own that. So really, I think these are the staff members that can help own that for the school to be able to implement. Tying into exactly what you were just saying, Bruce, some of the things that students need today are obviously the digital literacy, which we were just talking about, coding skills. They need to be able to do this. If they're going, no matter what field they're going into, they're going to need to be able to have these skills. Being able to just be logical and being able to be able to put things together in a logical manner is something that you learn from coding, and we want to make sure that that kind of continues. Students need to be able to communicate with others, and that's something that's taught through these having these digital literacy tools allows us to be able to communicate in very different ways than they were able to in the past. We want to make sure that they gain knowledge. There's the knowledge that they need for actually using these tools that's gained over time, and we also want to make sure that, in general, the basics of these digital resources. So let's say it's understanding word processing, copy and paste, things that are just really important for students to know are actually embedded within an area that starts as early and will start as early as kindergarten and move their way on up. And teachers also need to be able to have an ability to be able to use these digital learning toolkits. So we will start working a lot with teachers. And part of what the library media specialist also offers, as well as these digital literacy coaches within the building, is an opportunity for teachers to learn more in their classroom on how to better integrate these types of tools over time.
So they're like a leader in the building for the innovation in that area.
Yeah. So when we talk about, this is actually, I just copied and pasted this literally out of one of the articles that I had sent you, but it's a very succinct way of explaining, it's a Climbing to Excellence article, of the core elements of what we want in a learning commons. You want to have a flexible environment you want to have an area where kids can collaborate, and you want to be able to have resources and information for students in that area. So that may look a little bit different in each school, depending on your theme, but those are the core elements of what should be in any one of these libraries.
One of the things I'd like us as a committee to establish is what's the baseline that we expect to be the parity between all the schools? What do we expect is absolutely essential for this function in each school? And what is the extra that's added for their theme?
Yep.
Because we have to be, we're often chasing bells and whistles when in fact we really need to be dealing with meat and potatoes. So I really want to have a conversation in this committee about what's our baseline, what are we offering every school community, and then we can build from there.
Mm-hmm.
It's important.
And so that baseline should be built off 3 core elements that are in any library. The first is what we would call, we call them 3 different zones. The first is up here right now, which is a collaborative zone. An area where students can focus on project-based learning and group work. They can actually, there's some examples of that would be being able to do a multimedia presentation together, being able to display their own work and share amongst a core group of kids. Some of the core elements of that space are tables need to be able to be moved and reconfigured very easily so that kids can actually use that space for what they need. And from a technical and a spec standpoint, you want to make sure there's power and access. I mean, because in a lot of ways, it's those simple things that really make a difference. The technology is going to continually change, but having Wi-Fi and having enough power, those are 2 of the core elements that are really needed in any space for the tools that we use. If they're all digital, they all are going to need to be charged at one point or
I
another.
like those tables that have the charging things, you know, the round ones with
Yep.
those at Kendall, I think they have them, and they're really great.
Yeah, and in some cases, we have like little pods that are actually just charging pods where you can like lay your laptop on and there's a plug so that the student can leave it there for a short period of time. So we have a variety of different ways of doing this, but that's core that in the collaborative space, those elements have to be there. How that looks in each school may be different depending on the type of furniture that you want it to look like. A second zone would be what we call like a social learning zone. And this is, I mean, social learning and collaboration can sound very similar to each other, but it's not really. This is actually one of those areas where we want students to be able to have kind of creative play opportunities and be able to be a little bit more casual and comfortable. So a lot of times when you see this, the best term that I've seen used for this is you want it to look like your living room. So you have soft seating for the kids to be able to work. A variety of different types of work surfaces. So in many cases you see tables that students can actually just write specifically on and actually take notes and work together collaboratively. And ideally, if in time you can get a QR code and make copies of those so they can keep their notes digitally. But those kinds of things are things that you want to be able to see in these spaces for these students. You want to make sure that they can interact with each other. And noise is normal in that space. That's actually, there's productive noise, and this is what you want to be hearing in those kinds of social learning zones. So that's another zone that should be built into each one of our
It would be
libraries.
a great space for these book clubs that we've been talking about.
And then the last zone is we also want to be able to have a space where students can actually focus, which is what we call an individual study zone. So this is an area where you may see cubicles, you may see other ways of kids being able to kind of focus on a specific task if they're doing research and working on their own. So between those different areas, and once again you can see it as once again cubicles, privacy screens, it depends, it would look different in each one, but if you develop these 3 elements as your baseline to a learning commons, you've actually built a good structure, a foundation around where you can actually then build your curriculum on top of.
Right. So let's say you have a teacher who is very competent in these areas and has access to the technology in his or her classroom. You would expect to find these 3 zones you're discussing inside that classroom, correct?
Yeah, very similar to it.
And you would expect everything that you're talking about happening in the library or the media center to be taking place in the classroom also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of like the discussion of pullouts we had. In a perfect world, perhaps every classroom is a digital dream for the kids.
Well,
Yeah.
except for I would suggest that the general education classroom teacher has training in reading specialty and math specialty, but your library media specialist has extended training in providing more resources and more, a different approach. And we need a multi-sensory approach to learning.
Maybe, but whether what you're talking about, in my view, in the future, will be in the classroom as well as in the center.
100%.
And at that point, we have to rethink everything you're talking about the role of the media centers. If 90% of it is going on in the classroom, or 70% of it, and take it even further.
Yeah, that's when the innovation really comes into play in those media centers. And that's actually when then the media specialist can truly integrate themselves as almost like a coach as well. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that because some of the curriculum development that we're going to do in the summer is leading towards the beginnings of actually building that type of a curriculum. I wanted to also give you a little bit of a historical perspective of how we've gotten to where we're at right now so that you just have some basic numbers in front of you. So back in 2014, throughout the district, we basically had all traditional libraries. Okay, there was very, very little funding that was put into any of the libraries. We only had 3 certified library media specialists in the district, and they were all at the high schools. And one of the things that was pretty apparent with this is that the libraries were a place to go and check out books. There wasn't a lot of cohesiveness going on between the classroom teachers, and by no fault of anybody. I mean, there just wasn't the resources and the capacity for that. Yes?
Can I just give some further context? In 2011, during the height of the recession, there was an attempt to actually close the libraries for a fiscal year, and we went to library aids. And we also zeroed out investment in new books. So only schools that could eke out financing from their PTOs, if they ran a book fair, which some of them really don't, were able to purchase new books. And that especially was telling in our fiction collections. We didn't have the newer fiction sometimes, and also in our nonfiction, where the general standard is to phase out books after 10 years. But we couldn't because we hadn't acquired the new ones, and so we had extremely books from the 60s and 70s in our geography and so forth section and science section. So it was problematic that we did that, and we need, just like we have to catch up with our facilities where we got behind in maintenance, we need to do the same in our libraries.
Yeah, and we did, back then though, we did start this process back in 2014, and kudos to Talia Negroni for really helping with that process. I mean, her background actually was a library media specialist. Kind of funny that she was actually, she'd probably kill me for saying this, she was my library media specialist when I was in school. So, but no, she's a wealth of knowledge, and really worked hard on trying to help lead the libraries throughout the district and getting things moving along that track. But once again, there wasn't really a lot of money in that area. We did write a grant at that time as well. We put in for a Race to the Top grant. We were one of the 30 national finalists, but we were not awarded it at the time, and that was for about 20-some-odd million towards, and that all of that money would have gone towards reinventing our libraries at the time. So we had kind of a game plan on knowing that we wanted to move in that direction at that point.
Is this something that, we know that there's going to be this $300 million for disengaged youth in Connecticut? Is this something we could build something out from these library, the Learning Commons could be some sort of an after-school. Could we tap into that funding for this in some way?
I mean, I think we could
try.
Yeah, look into that opportunity.
Yeah.
I think it's really critical though, because one of the things that we did in the past, as you kind of mentioned, is we lost our libraries because we kind of didn't own them as a community. We don't want to do that again, so I think what we want to do is make sure that there's a plan in place, and that this is something that we actually own quite a bit locally. Any of the innovation that goes on top of it may be something we want to ask for, but I think we want to show some sustainability first, and that'll really help. But yeah.
I just wanted to share, the Norwalk Acts behavioral study that just came out mid-month. There was a statistic that 17% of our 7th, 9th, and 11th graders are reading for pleasure, which means the rest of them are not. And what are we doing that's having them not be engaged. And we talk about disengaged youth, this is an area in which we're disengaged from the learning process. So I think we could make an argument that this is a needed area.
So just a real quick broad overview, what we've accomplished in the area of facilities. And once again, most of these facilities upgrades have been done through PTOs or small amounts of funding from the district. The schools that are listed here, excuse me, some of the schools that are not listed here are not listed on purpose because they will be going through the construction phase. So that would be where the money would come from. But these were, in general, the updated schools, Fox Run, Rowayton, Silverine, Tracy, Nathan Hale, and schools that have been updating by using PTO funds, so they're in different stages, are Brookside, Cranberry, Kendall, Merrimack is actually now in the process of moving forward with updating a section of their Learning Commons. West Rocks will be doing this as well. We just they're getting some renderings developed right now. Rowton, Norwalk High, and I gave you an example of what the renderings could look like for Norwalk High and how we've been working to try and come up with ideas. And then Brian McMahon. If you haven't been in the McMahon, well, we were in the McMahon lab. You saw how they kind of cleaned it out and how they're building it out now.
So I know Fox Run, Rowayton were PTO. Tracy was from the student-based budget. Where did the money for Silvermine and Nathan Hale come from?
Nathan Hale, I have to, once again, that would be nice to have my notes.
I know it was part of moving Teach to One.
It was, yes. It was actually in the process of moving Teach to One, so there was no extra money, but the fact that when we did actually move it, we actually embedded it within the cost of actually building out the new TTO lab.
Excuse me, do you have any answer to that question?
Silvermine was PTO funded.
Entirely.
It was actually the first
Yeah.
elementary to be done.
That's right. Then Fox.
What year was it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I want to say 2014, yeah.
Yeah.
Around there.
Yeah, I think it was actually 15 by the time it was done, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and Fox Run was funded a lot through grants that actually Mr. Martinez, started on his own, actually getting people to fund. One being the Grossman Family Foundation actually funded a good portion of that when they were starting and moving forward. So, great. So that's kind of like a little bit of where we're at with our buildings. Staffing. I'm really proud to say that, right now, we have certified library media specialists at Brookside, Audra, Fox Run, Rowayton, Nathan Hale, Brian McMahon, Norwalk High. Brian McMahon has 2, Norwalk High has 1. Adam has he's actually looking and interviewing right now for a library media specialist for next year, and Joe Vellucci has actually done the same at Rowayton. So those will be in place for next year. In the schools that do not have a certified library and media specialist, many of them have positions that are certified teachers that are acting in a very similar fashion and doing a lot of the same type of work. So the best example I can give you is Kendall and Randall Austin. What he's been actually doing with his enhanced curriculum fits in direct alignment. It's the same type of skill set and using the same standards that are being taught that a library and media specialist would be also teaching in certain cases.
And that's the model that Merrimack plans to use too, right?
Yes, yes, Merrimack does too as well, yeah.
One question on that. So are those teachers who are digital literacy staff, are they also teachers of the other core curricular areas, or they just are doing digital?
They're acting in the Learning Commons. That is their home base. That is exactly what they're working on. At Cranberry, it's similar, and at Columbus and Jefferson, they're actually STEM coaches that are there doing this type of work. But that is their role. So, and then once again, it's a similar alignment.
And PONUS, is that part of the STEAM model, Brenda? Because that's the only middle school that's not on this list.
Yes, because I didn't put them in there because of the construction phase, once again, that they're actually going to be building out their space.
So a decision hasn't been made, and it'll be part of the conversation about how that program evolves.
And part of the K-8 rollout too.
Yep.
What does that space look like when it's?
Yep, okay. And have we talked, can we include in the conversation access points, but I think that comes further. When they can go in middle school. Because in elementary school, there's a set time as a special for most of the models. but in the middle school, there isn't yet. So I'm curious to see how that.
So the schools that have library media specials at the middle school, it is also a set time. It becomes a special right now. So we will be, but there's also open times as well. But it is
Not in
actually
one middle
considered,
school.
yeah,
Right now, Nathan Ham.
yep. But next year, you know, like I said, the other schools will actually be, they'll be scheduled as a special. Does that answer your question?
Well, if it's a related art at Nathan Hale, does it touch every student? You know, if it's an elective in the related arts period, what if they don't choose it at any point during their 3 years? That concerns me. I would prefer that it would be embedded in the curriculum experience
Mhm.
through ELA, social studies, science.
Well, you have to remember that they're on the 80-minute block, right?
Mhm.
So they have limited access to electives.
So until, assuming that the revisions to the middle school redesign that we're piloting, we're moving
Right.
forward with
Bonus,
next year
right.
work and are effective, then other schools could transition to that, and then they would have more flexibility with an additional block.
Okay, but we're not considering a policy where you require a library that some point in your career you have this special.
That's the dilemma, that if most of it's not happening in the classroom, as soon as you sit down with a master schedule, it's never going to be perfect.
Yep.
You do the best you can. And that's the dilemma we have to deal with. And to ensure that kids get what they need, we're going to eventually have to foot the bill to ensure that our classrooms are equipped to do pretty much what's necessary. And then you have all the extras that the media center can provide.
And
But like I said, scheduling gets to be crazier and crazier and crazier.
And I do think that at the middle and high school level, though, those library media specialists also have to integrate and be cohesive, like work within those classrooms as well. So I mean, I think that comes in time right now. Yeah.
I would hazard a guess based on my very limited experience that the majority of the kids at NCC could have used a should have come in with a much stronger background.
Yeah.
They are unbelievable in the things that they do know, but there's things that they were never exposed to.
So I think that when Tina talks a little bit about the digital literacy curriculum at K-8, you'll see that there's actually, the idea is to have that assured experience is that these standards are met by the time they hit high school. So they're prepared to do the work that they need to do in high school, and then actually eventually be prepared for what they need in
So I think
college.
what's important to me is that curriculum as it's developed is embedded in the core classes so that we don't miss anybody, that we're touching every kid.
And it should be integrated in the sense that, I mean, there are certain core elements that we know that sometimes stand a little bit in isolation, but for the most part, almost all of it should be taught, you know, I mean, you can teach a lot of we've talked about the idea of teaching multimedia skills that are kind of tied through the humanities, which actually would make a lot of sense. And by 6th grade, one of the projects could be a PSA that's actually developed, that actually integrates the idea of using the technology along with the learning that goes on in the classroom. Yeah, that is ultimately the goal.
Do you have more, Ralph?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, just real quick, so next steps, real quickly. So we're going to be looking at developing the first steps of this, which is a K-8 digital literacy curriculum over the summer. We'll be using a number of different tools. Tina's going to talk about learning.com in just a second. Nearpod is a platform that we're actually going to be using as well, that we can embed a lot of these activities into and has content, as well as a way for us to be able to deliver that instruction. And we're going to be basing it off of a lot of the ISTE as well as the AASL, which is the Librarian Association standards. And one thing I didn't send to you because it's large and it doesn't print well, but I left copies for it here, is if you wanted to, this is actually, I'll leave copies for you. This is a crosswalk of the ISTE standards in line with AASL at each level on what we're looking to accomplish over the next couple of years.
Right.
Okay.
So is this The digital literacy curriculum, so there's no, that's the only library curriculum or Learning Commons curriculum committee that's happening this summer?
So right now, yes, that is the one that we're actually using for digital
So I
literacy.
feel like we're leaving something out in that it's focusing on digital literacy and not research, primary source.
Let's
That
talk
is
about
Yeah.
learning that, yeah.
Perfect
So be-
segue.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, Rob.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I think what you're gonna see, and Ralph and Tina and I have been working very closely together because we recognize exactly what you're saying. Our goal is to make a public promise of what is the digital toolkit that a child enters the high school with in Norwalk. And that any teacher in the high school who wants a child to do a PowerPoint presentation or to use a word processor and to be safe in an internet environment knows that there were incremental outcomes that children met as they came through the elementary and the middle school. Now, one of the things, we don't have a luxury of just adding a separate class that everybody takes every year, right? We have to have a little more finesse for two reasons. One is not enough hours in the day, and secondly, not the best way children learn, right? They learn in applied settings. So as we start to explore this idea of digital literacy, we have to make a decision where some of this curriculum will nest. So already our elementary teachers do keyboarding with kids, right? So what's the keyboarding curriculum? What's the app that we'll use? And then what we're looking at with our curriculum, and I think we put a copy in their packet, right, of the digital literacy curriculum, the scope and sequence. What you'll see from that, from tech, is sometimes you'll find us trying to use accelerators. Things that have already been developed and designed are best in class in the country. And they won't be the last curriculum we ever use, but it'll be a place for us to start. If you went to learning.com and you had a sign in to this site, this is a web-enabled site for any teacher that we license up. They would go in, they'd say, I'm a first grade teacher, I want to be able to work on the computer fundamental skills for second grade. It's all web enabled and there's lessons and simulations for every area and every grade. A teacher can then use that computer-driven program, or they can enhance it with some of their own ideas or maybe apply it directly to the curriculum. But what this does is it gives us a complete online sequence of what's most important at what grade so we can start to fulfill that promise. So Bruce, back to your point, what we'd like to do is in our integration work is say, okay, in English language arts, at the elementary level, the word processing skills need to be built into the writing program. So where will we do that? What device will they work on? And what stories will they have? And we would expect that every student would be publishing a word processed piece at each grade level, and that gets built into the ELA curriculum right next to writing because those things are tangential to the development of the child, right? And if a teacher's unsure, then we give them the curriculum, which is web-enabled, that they can go into and grab their lesson that they need, as opposed to trying to write 100 different lessons in 100 different sequences. We want our teachers to be thinking about where these apply in the curriculum, as opposed to having to just name those skills. So this is an accelerator that we are recommending to the board as a curriculum for digital literacy for the 1920 school year. Now in this digital literacy curriculum, there's also a piece on coding. And we have a vision, as Ralph and Tina and I are working as we're laying out our new STEAM environment, where coding has a K-8 curriculum and hopefully K through high school. We may in that piece not use this and use a product from code.org that is more developed and more sophisticated, but a curriculum like this allows us to substitute for a better curricular design in a particular area, but still know that we're addressing the key components of our digital literacy framework, right? So those are these very delicate conversations we're having. If we have some places in the middle school, for example, where they will have an elective in technology design. And for them, they may go deeply into code.org, right? So that would be a place where it would nest easily. So this concept of curriculum sequence and expectation and naming it, access for students to have the tools, and as you were saying, this isn't taught in the media center, right? These are all embedded within our curriculum, and the better job we do, it'll also help teachers to get more facile with key pieces of software we'd want them to use.
And this actually goes back to the gifted program and the idea of the shadow curriculum of extension projects, working with the library media specialists to really identify when you have a kid that's ready to go down the rabbit hole, where to send them and how to support them is going to be really important. So, because many teachers aren't prepared for that,
The other thing this leverages for us, because we're always trying to find time where students are together that we can kind of put maybe internet safety in, right? And so now we have the advisor-advisee in our middle school. So now this curriculum allows us to say, you know what, during advisor-advisee this month, we want these two modules taught on internet safety, and this is how we can start to put that digital citizenship into the curriculum as well, and where we find a place for it. Now every teacher doesn't have to write the curriculum, we actually can give them those modules and know that there's a sequence 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
The truth is that may need to start 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I'm
Oh,
hearing
absolutely.
From the elementary teachers that they're having a great deal of difficulty with bad use of technology by their students.
So just to add to the story a little bit, as you mentioned before, digital literacy is a broad term, very, very much like 21st century learning or 21st century skills. It too ties into a student's skill set, knowledge, critical thinking and application relative to a digital environment. So, arguably, now that there is such advancement in technology, being efficient, almost as so much so that we cannot function without it, it is arguably one of the most important curricula that students should be exposed to and experience throughout their whole career, right? And so when we talk about and we look at the curriculum a little bit more in depth, you'll see that depending on how it can be utilized, it is a broad curriculum that requires us to go in depth and name some of those assured experiences throughout a student's career and name those to ensure that coherence and consistency that you were kind of referring to before. And also, Bruce, you were talking a little bit about the application and the ability for students to use these tools and use them with an understanding of responsibility around them, because it's evolving so quickly. How do we stay ahead of that? So a lot of this that we talk about is relative to device agnostic tools and the ability for students to be adaptable no matter what device they have in front of them, because as the technology evolves, it's not about the tool in front of them, it's their ability to adjust and adapt and utilize whatever they have in front of them.
You keep talking about students, and I agree. But my limited experience in this area saw that the differences, the range of skill levels among students was like this compared to the range of skill levels among teaching staff was kind of like this. And to the point where in elementary classrooms with technology that was there, the students were running the show from repairs to everything else. That's not the ideal situation where the students are much more adept at this than the teachers, because they'll reach a wall, they won't be able to get past it. So we've got to, I'm guessing we need to invest a whole lot in PD. And that's complicated. A reading teacher is a reading teacher, a 4th grade teacher is a 4th grade teacher, not a computer scientist, not a computer engineer. But there has to be a way to bring them up to the level that's appropriate for upper elementary, middle school, and high school. And that's probably not going to be that easy to do.
Well, and think about the promise we're making about the expectations, what students will know and be able to do in digital literacy when they walk in the high school door. We have a similar promise for what teachers need to know and be able to do so they can support. But what we're also going to do is we're not going to take every reading teacher and make them a coding teacher, right? That's what we're going to do is take the skills that here are closest to the body of work that teacher does. So we might say, let's do social studies training and build some units with multimedia, and that's where we'll invest in that. So every teacher doesn't have to learn everything, but some things that are close, and that's what the curriculum framework helps us do as well.
And I think what I'm hearing Brenda also mention, that and Ralph talked about it too, there's 2 layers of this, right? Digital literacy integration that's appropriate and applicable to a unit of study, let's say, and as well as some isolated skills where we would actually utilize some of our coaches and our library media specialists to provide isolated, mastery-based content and units of study in a separate curriculum, because there are potentially delivered in a separate setting. Sometimes some of those skills around keyboarding, we need to find time to carve out that time for students to actually utilize the keyboarding tool with a progress monitoring and feedback tool around efficiency, making sure that because there are standards related to those keyboarding skills and words per minute as a student progresses from grades 3 to 5 to 7. Yes,
I could
they're
use
named.
that progress.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is going to just be a quick couple-minute overview of the Learning.com platform called EasyTech.
That's interesting.
Nice.
Also, pages, there's like 3 pages of 4 in this, and
Yeah.
there's text cut off. Is that something that we need, or?
So when I transitioned from Google Slides to PowerPoint, it did a funky little something, so ignore that.
Google Slides.
I'm
Agnostic.
Technology becoming more integrated into the classroom. Teaching digital literacy is now an extension. So, what is digital literacy? It's the ability to interact, communicate, and create with technology. To be successful, students need to begin their digital literacy journey as early as kindergarten. But with limited time, resources, and conflicting priorities, how do educators fit in one more thing? Learning.com provides an easy-to-implement, complete instructional solution for kindergarten through 8th grade that covers the 12 essentials of digital literacy. From keyboarding to online safety, word processing to coding, our curriculum helps educators confidently teach digital literacy, even if they don't have previous experience. It includes auto-scored interactive lessons and gamified elements to motivate students, scaffolded practice and application exercises to deepen learning, and assessments that provide instant feedback to measure progress. Preparing today's students for success in our increasingly digital world is not easy. At Learning.com, we're passionate about breaking down barriers and making it simple to equip students with the digital literacy skills they need for college and their future careers.
So you'll see that the Learning.com platform actually has 12 robust modules. Digital literacy in a curriculum that can support all of those areas really falls into 4 different categories. Technological skills and access. So those are the learning activities around navigating to the internet, accessing the internet, simple computer skills and usability. The second portion is authorship rules. There's a lot of conversation around being able to seamlessly move across different types of tools, like if you're using Google Classroom or using Office 365 and some of the functionality there, the ability to move back and forth and share documents in that kind of a setting. Representation rules, so that talks about, Ralph talked a little bit about it before, making sure that the research that you're finding or the information that you're finding when you search is authentic and it's real, right? And then finally, that online social responsibility piece, which most of us are very familiar with. That's where we talk about digital ethics, and when we are looking at the user's wherewithal to know when it's appropriate to share things or content, information, pictures, and graphics on a social platform, whether that be Twitter or Snapchat or Facebook. So those are the broad 4 areas that those 12 modules kind of fit into. And the last piece too, actually, in the 4th area on social responsibility, also includes privacy laws and copyright laws. So within all of those areas, they are related, as Ralph mentioned before, to all of the standards. Obviously, in a digital learning suite, we're focusing mostly on the standards that are related to the library media specialist standards, the ISTE standards, and even you'll see that the next gen science standards and social studies standards are there, but mostly priority goes towards the computer science standards, the ISTE standards, and the library media standards.
This is somewhat adjacent, but just something I'm hoping you can consider as you're looking at all of this. Can we work in, I'm always worried about children not being aware of primary sources and not having access to the wider world of information beyond the internet and our limited library space. So Connecticut has a statewide interlibrary loaning program where you can go on the state catalog and find any book in any library and they will ship it to you. I think we need to teach our students how to access that so that they can learn things that are happening beyond the scope of what Norwalk has any expertise in.
Agreed. And I think
Yeah,
too,
we do, actually, I
Destiny,
believe we do that at the high school level. So.
But I'm suggesting
Yeah.
that with
No,
the
you're
school-wide enrichment model and people going into deep
Mhm.
dive passion projects, that we should be teaching it to them in
Mhm.
third,
Oh,
fourth,
agreed.
fifth grade, and
And
they
in-
can go nuts
yeah.
with it for the next 8 years.
agreed. Research in general through the library media curriculum and the experiences of the library's media specialists. A perfect example would be a social studies unit of study where there's even ELA where there's a research component and the experience for the classroom teacher to work collaboratively with the library media specialist to actually do the research and find multiple sources to support the project or the paper.
Right, so
Exactly.
beyond Wikipedia, beyond what's
Correct.
in their school library, beyond what's in the Norwalk library, what's at Yale, what's at, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think our, it's funny, as you think about these projects and stuff, I mean, I think a few months ago being over at Brian McMahon, and actually it was a couple of days before the History Day presentations, and being in the back room with Jamie and with Beverly, our two library media specialists over there, with projects just laid out with the kids. So they were that support mechanism as well as the classroom teacher to make sure that things were in place. So they had been working with students throughout the whole time. So we are trying to embed that same type of skill
Excellent,
set,
I just
yeah.
want to make sure we provide our kids that resource.
Sure. And then you saw in the video a little bit about how they deliver the content within those 4 big, broad areas within the 12 modules. You can see that a lot of the curriculum, all the curriculum is interactive. There's a multitude of whole class lessons, small group lessons, and independent lessons. Students are expected to engage with the content through simulation, discussion boards, hands-on activities, and also project-based learning activities as well. So they also have incentives built in, so there's a gamification component of the platform. And I think the best part about it is that it's, since we are the infancy stages of writing the curriculum, we are looking and exploring at how we can utilize this tool not only as a library media specialist curriculum, but also, as Brenda said, how do we infuse some of these skills within our curricula already in a unit of study to enhance it. And that way it doesn't seem like something extra, it's an additional way to engage and have the students interact with the content.
And and then of course we'll need to know what the rollout is to get teachers on board with actually doing it.
Right.
So one of our questions is that, we're really recommending a new curriculum adoption for grades K through 8 in digital literacy. And I'm not quite sure about the process. Does the Curriculum and Instruction Committee make a recommendation to the board for that kind of approval?
Yes, that's what we've done, so we did that with
Yeah, she's talking to me. Yes, what you would have to do is, we would pass judgment right tonight, and informally, you would proceed to try to get it on the agenda for June. There'd be a brief presentation, we would speak to it, and then the board would yay or nay. But we would, before we leave tonight, we would have to get the consent approval, the informal approval of the committee. Okay?
So the approval to create it, and then we'll review it and approve it once it's been created. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we can't
Okay.
move forward officially.
Got it.
Yeah.
But the curriculum is created.
It's
created.
What we're recommending is that we purchase learning.com as a web-enabled digital literacy curriculum for grades K through 8. And that framework, those 12 components and those sub-skills across grades, becomes the curricular framework. So curriculum can be written from a blank piece of paper, right? It can be purchased as a program.
Okay.
And we're recommending that this actually be the
We
curriculum
did
for
something
digital
similar
literacy.
with- I guess a little bit similar in science, okay? Okay, so,
Yeah.
first of all, how much are we talking about, roughly?
I can get you that exactly. Do
We
you
have
have
it.
the quote in front of you, or?
It's about 60.
6, I would think it was about 60.
$65,000 for all buildings.
Okay. For all buildings?
All buildings.
And then what,
16
related
buildings.
cost,
Yes,
training?
but we've also saved money because we do have a typing curriculum that I'm paying $7,000
That you
for
did.
already, so that goes away. There's a couple of other smaller items, so it's a reasonable cost.
And, I'm sorry, is that an ongoing cost, or is
Yeah,
that?
it's ongoing.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
the
it's
annual
ongoing.
access. It's why I say, I mean, my work with this curriculum in the past, if we think about anchoring it for a couple of years here, what'll happen is that we'll get more sophisticated and we'll start to find the modules we like best, and then we'll start to develop our own, right? So I wouldn't say this would be the curriculum that we would have for the next 5 years, but we certainly would think about it as a 3-year bridge to developing our own literacy curriculum, digital literacy curriculum for Norwalk.
All right, so let me, if I can put this, make sure we're all on the same page. We're moving ahead when it comes to digital literacy, no matter how you cut it, like every school system in the country. We have a way to not have to invent the wheel because there's so much out there at a cost of $65,000 a year until we feel that we can move in a different direction.
Yep.
And, okay, so what we would need, number one, okay from the committee. Number two, run it by folks, other folks. Number three, it would be with some kind of price tag at the next committee, at the next board meeting, business meeting, which would be the last business meeting of this year, and I'm sure it would be approved. Any questions on this? Yeah.
Just because of the experience we have with the science situation, what other programs or curriculums did you consider, and why did you rule them out? Why did you choose this one? I feel a little unprepared for an action item.
Yeah, so learning.com is the most comprehensive baseline that you can start with. I think if you have to think of it that way. Code.org is a good example of what we talked about, where that will become a free resource in time beyond we have to pay for professional development. But that's something that we will augment, so that coding piece would go away over time. That would be one of the first things you could actually slice out of there and replace. The keyboarding is another good example of that. Once again, just something that can actually be assessed and that you can progress monitor. Simple enough to do. But learning.com is kind of the standard baseline that you would actually use.
So there were 3 choices about developing. So as we've been working on, as I've been working for the last 3 months on the conversation of building out a K-8 STEAM school, it's really difficult to envision STEAM school without a digital literacy curriculum, right? Because everything becomes this incremental understanding of digital literacy and how it applies in problem solving and the creation of work. And when we kind of looked at what we have and how we're building those skills, you have 3 choices of what you do. You start with a group of expert teachers, and you start to take their expertise and you write their curriculum. The second is you do a product cull. So you'd have one product over here for the multimedia, and then you'd have another product for your coding, you'd have another product for your digital literacy, and you can actually buy curricular products in specialty areas. Or the third thing, as Ralph was saying, if you want a comprehensive approach where you start with a framework that links over time the 12 competencies, then this is really the product on market that actually has the most development in this area, and one that I'm most experienced in using. So it wasn't so much that we called a whole bunch of products to compare, it was really which one of these are we going to go down as we build out our digital literacy capacity.
Yeah, there are many products like this here.
No.
So.
Yeah, I'm impressed with the 4, I like the 4 areas. You start out with those areas, I buy into that. I think it's proper, and then you have the modules based on that. For $65,000, we can always decide sometime next year.
Yeah.
No, this doesn't
I
work.
do have one question on the budget. Is this cost already baked into the budget that's, okay,
Yes.
perfect, thank you.
So normally I would rather have time to kick the tires and maybe kick around in the modules. I'm trusting you, even after being burned last year with I felt uncomfortable with the results of the science, which is not your responsibility, but in the future, something like this, I'd love to have some more time to kick the tires on before we have to go to an action item. I know it's the end of the year and we need to move forward, but is there any chance we could table it, have the month to look at it, and then vote it at the curriculum and have it on the agenda for the board meeting
I
in
would
June?
prefer to move it forward. It's a busy time of year for everybody.
Okay.
And I think, I think there's some issues with the science rollout, but I don't think we were burned or anything like that. I think there were some issues with the we'll see in a few years. If we're happy, then it was fine. It was
And
par for the course.
Is there a
But-
way to, would it make you more comfortable too, in the time between now and when we vote on it officially, to have access to some sample or
Exactly,
something?
that
so
would
you still have
definitely
that
make me
time?
feel
Yep.
more comfortable moving it to the
So
full
we still
board.
have essentially a month
Yep.
to
We could
review that
probably do
before
that
the
on
official
our
vote.
own.
Yeah, that's-
Tonight,
yeah.
if we wanted. I mean,
And
it's there
you
already.
know-
We have some sample accounts already that you can log in.
That would
Right,
be
so
great.
that was part of our research, to
Yeah.
actually become the student and the
Yeah.
teacher through that research process, so I can gladly send along the
I
the
so
sample.
appreciate it, I'm a kick tired
It's a lot of
girl.
fun. It's a lot of fun to probably play for a
All right,
while.
so then,
Yeah.
here's what we-
I have a
okay.
couple.
Sure.
So I think we're all on board with this.
Yeah.
We're, sight unseen is always a little bit of a problem.
Sure.
Correct.
But for 65, I think we're fine. Next, we will just have, if there are any, we will put it on the agenda for the committee before that business meeting. But we will also move, we can also table it, we'll also put it on the regular Board of Ed agenda. If for whatever reasons it's a no-go, it's a no-go. But we will we'll allow for flexibility, and we have a month to do whatever we want as individuals. Fine, okay? So is that approach okay?
Yep.
Okay, so you have our blessing
Great.
to move forward with this.
Do we need to take a vote?
Thank you.
Okay, well, we'd have to amend the agenda to add an action item.
Okay.
So we'll do the official action,
Yeah,
the next
okay.
one preceding
Got it.
the official vote.
Okay.
Got it.
Julie moved to transform the, which one, I'm looking at a mess here, I apologize. Digital literacy curriculum to turn that into a motion to move forward with, what was the specific name? Get it right.
Learning.com, Easy Tech.
Learning.com, what?
Easy Tech curriculum.
Easy Tech curriculum. And, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, Easy Tech, isn't that what they call it at Staples? Easy Tech.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.